There we go.
Wow, sorry about that, everyone. Okay, so yeah, we're going to discuss the biological assessment tool. As Maddie said, I'm planning on talking for about 30 minutes. So after that, hopefully there's some time for some discussion and if you guys have any thoughts or recommendations or questions, we'll have time to cover it then. So without further ado, and all technical difficulties aside, we'll get going. So the Kentucky Office of Nature Preserves, I'm going to cover a little bit of what we do and who we are. Basically, we have these several different mandates that are listed here that cover everything from creating state nature preserves to promoting scientific studies and saving threatened and endangered species and doing research for those, Kentucky Wild River System, and the Kentucky Heritage Land Conservation Fund. There's just a quick overview of what we do, and I know you guys are all able to read it. So we like to make sure that all of our activities are kind of focusing on at least one or several of these. And the Kentucky Biological Assessment Tool actually addresses 4 of these different mandates that we have as a state agency. A couple other different things that we do in our office. This is the Natural Areas branch. They are in charge of managing and protecting the properties within this state. And some of the things that they do are invasive species treatment, prescribed fires, or trail management as well. We also have our biological assessment branch, which basically what they're doing is completing research. There we go. I'm so sorry. Completing research on anything that's biological. So if we have mussels or fish, crayfish, birds, plants, we have our entire biological assessment branch that is addressing that. And then finally, we have education and outreach. It's such an important part of what we do to make sure that we are not the only ones doing education and research and promoting the long-term management of property and plants and animals in the state. So we like to always do education and outreach so that different state agencies and individuals are aware of what we're doing and the ways that they can individually maintain and preserve species and land in Kentucky. So here you can see on this map, basically it's a map of the different properties in Kentucky that the Office of Kentucky Nature Preserves is a part of. So the red ones are ones that we actually own. And I will be quite honest, it can get very complicated very quickly about who owns what property and who manages it and deeds and easements. But basically what this map is showing is all of the different locations across the state where we have properties and where we're involved in managing and owning them with partners across the state. And it is such an important part of what we do to have those partners and to think collaboratively and to work with them. So moving a little bit more towards the topic of our webinar today is the KYBAT. So the Office of Nature Preserves here on the left has a partnership with NatureServe, who actually helps maintain our threatened and endangered species database, which is called Biotic. So that's this top little window up here. And then more people in. There we go. And then we have down here, NatureServe is also in charge of what is our Kentucky Biological Assessment Tool. And why this is such a powerful combination for us is that having this kind of triangle of connection here is that it actually saves us so much time, one for our office and our people in the field collecting data, but also for like data managers and resources, that way it's kind of this nice triangle of interconnectedness, and it makes everything much smoother and flow a lot better for us, but also for everyone that's requesting data from us. There we go. Okay, so now we get to what we're doing here is what is the Kentucky Biological Assessment Tool? And it is basically an online platform that allows users to submit project areas and boundaries and receive information about threatened and endangered species, managed areas, areas of biological importance, important communities in the area, other properties that are there, all sorts of different information. And it's provided in a PDF format within about 5 to 10 minutes of submitting your report. And what's really awesome about this is that it used to take usually a minimum of about 2 weeks for someone who's interested in receiving our data to send us a shapefile or a GPS or anything like that, GPS points. And then for us to turn around and actually provide data back was quite a lengthy process. And this process from start to finish is about 10 minutes. So it's much easier, and it's actually getting people the data that they need faster and allows them to move forward with their projects, whatever they are. So that's very nice on both ends, on our end and on your end as well. It's a pretty easy process to go on and go through and kind of do and submit everything. We have a limit of about 10,000 acres is the maximum size of project that you're allowed to submit on KYBAT. Anything under that we feel fits within the scope of kind of a PDF report. Anything over that, it can be a little bit outside the scope. We prefer to have someone kind of lay hands on it and have more of a discussion and provide a little bit more data and hear a little bit more about your project, because the projects submitted to KYBAT are intended to be more of like an initial review or a biological assessment. Really anything over 10,000 acres can be a bit heftier. And so we like to kind of address those more personally. So that's not to say that we won't provide data, but just always feel free to reach out if you have issues with trying to submit and you realize it's because your project area is too large. So this right here is an example of a report that you would get from KYBAT. It's a PDF report that's listing information about all those kind of layers that I mentioned earlier. So what up at the top, it says, I think, occurrences, and that's just going to be the threatened and endangered species that are listed there in some communities. And then we also have managed areas down here. Each report, we have a minimum of $120 fee for each report, but that fee depends on the size of the buffer that you choose. And I will get very term heavy here, so I apologize. But the buffer is basically, if you have your project area and it's 5 acres and you can choose a mile outside of that. So if it's a mile or if it's 2 miles, that's going to be your buffer. You can also choose to have no buffer at all, but I will show you in our demonstration that it's very clear cut, the size of the buffer that you're using and the cost of that associated buffer. So it has nothing to do with the size of your project, just of the buffer, if that makes sense. I will also talk about the other layers that are on KYBAT as resources that are nice to view and to be able to see. So we have, first of all, we have state nature preserves. So state nature preserves are properties that are in Kentucky that are associated more with protecting the quality of the property and the endangered species, the long term of saving it. Not saving it per se, I said protecting it. We do have some that are open to the public that have trails, but they are very, very closely regulated to ensure that the long-term protection is maintained. Some of these are the ones that are available to the public and open to the public are available on KYBAT, that you can view them there. We also have our state natural areas, which vary slightly from a state nature preserve, and that their intended purpose is more to be for education and outreach and hiking, so more for those types of activities. They're usually, the communities within those state natural areas are usually a little bit less sensitive than other locations across the state, say in a state nature preserve. I believe we have 9 of them, and 7 of them are listed on KYBAT, and you can view them there. We often partner with Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, and some of them are even open for hunting. I mentioned this briefly earlier, and this is, Maddie, if you ever feel like jumping in, you're welcome to now, because you're more aware of what's going on with this and better at explaining it. But this is our Heritage Land Conservation Fund. The Heritage Land Conservation Fund is basically it's a fund that's from, if you see those license plates that have either butterflies or cardinals or wildcats on them, that the funds from those, as well as other environmental taxes and things in the state, actually go into a fund where half of it is given to state agencies. So like the Office of Nature Preserves or Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they're able to purchase property to maintain and protect. The other half goes to basically a fund that other agencies, other organizations. So if that's a university or a local government or a land trust, they're able to apply to also buy land for conservation purposes. And there are several different qualifying aspects of that land that they have to be able to even apply for this money. And I believe we are involved with about 150 properties across the state, most of which Maddie is heavily involved with. And that's those layers, the public ones are also available on KYBAT that you can view and see there. And then the last kind of nature preserves layer that I'm going to discuss is the Wild Rivers Program. It was established by the Wild Rivers Act, I think, of 1972. And basically what it is protecting not just land, but the property that's adjacent to these rivers. So we have 9 rivers, of which certain segments are incorporated into the Wild River Program. So it's almost 27,000 acres, I think 114 miles. And it's not just the river itself, it's the land that's adjacent, I think up to 2,000 feet on either side of those rivers. And it's basically just to ensure the long-term protection of everything in the river, and then it prevents development or unwise use of anything along the sides of them. Also available on KYBAT are layers that are not maintained by our office. So we have partners that have state public lands like Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. We have state roads, that is Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Division of Water maintains hydrological unit codes. And then we have federal partners that do things like public lands. So the great thing about this is that when these partners update their layers, we have it set up in KYBAT that as they update them and make them publicly available, we are getting the latest updates. So there's no real lag in, do we have the up-to-date layers? As long as they've updated it, it's what we have. So that's always really nice to know that the data that you're looking at is accurate to the best of our abilities. So I will now go do a quick demonstration of KYBAT and how it works. You still able to see everything? Maddie didn't nod, but I'm going to say that's a yes. What you're seeing here is the landing page for KYBAT. So if you look up kynaturepreserves.org, you are able to come straight to this website. And I am logged in as I'm obviously an administrator, but I am logged in as a non-administrative user right now. So everything that I see, everything that you see here today is exactly how it will look for you. There's no other extra buttons or anything that I can do here that you're not able to do. So this is the landing page. As I mentioned earlier, there's a help video. Everything I walk through today is contained in this help video. So if I go through something and you have a question and I've confused you, you're more than welcome to ask and clarify today. But if you also want to come back and just watch the secret video, you're welcome to do that. It's just at the bottom of that landing page. So for today, we're going to start, we're just going to go up to map. And here you can see on the left when it loads, all of these different layers that I was just talking about. So we have the wild rivers, the state natural areas and nature preserves, the HLCF, but then also all of our partner layers as well. And the really cool thing about this is if we have a state natural area and you're like, oh, I want to go see, I want to learn more about these. If you just hit this little info button right here, this identify tool, and then you can come click on it, it'll open like a nice little tab that tells you all about what you're looking at and what it's called and all of these things. But you can also scroll down and we have our layer set up that you can click on this link here and you're actually able to go to the page and learn more about Steel Hollow State Natural Area and learn more about it. And that works for any of our layers as well as some of our partner layers if they have set them up that way. But that's how you're able to learn a little bit more information if you wanted to know. That's the really cool part. And what KYBAT is actually created for is for you to be able to submit projects for kind of an environmental review. So what you'll usually do is come up here and you'll say create project. It'll want you to acknowledge that there is a report fee, $120, and it'll usually be sent to you in about 2 weeks. You just say yes. Now here comes the submission part. You are able to actually draw your shape if you so choose. That's usually a pretty rare occurrence for us. People usually have predefined project areas that they are wanting to get information for, which is very easy. You just click this folder right here and you're able to select a file to upload. So that has to be an Esri shapefile, a KML, or a GML file. And it's just, and it can't be a point line or a polygon. Again, we generally usually have polygons, but points or lines are also accepted. So you just hit select file to upload. I will see if I can get it to load. And of course, it's gonna have a hissy fit. Uh-oh, I might have found it now. Oh, perfect. Okay, so have your shapefile all ready to go and in a zip folder. it's going to load here and you're able to look at it and usually say, yes, this is where I think it should be. Obviously, this is not any sort of project that we're doing because it's across I-75. And you can check here and say like that total acreage seems right, total perimeter seems correct, and you're good to go. So then you just hit accept. It's going to verify everything. It's at that point that if your project was over 10,000 acres, that it would, excuse me, that you get an error saying it's too large, please contact, let us know. However, ours is not too large. So I would just say this is a KYBAT webinar test. This is where you would enter if your organization has a specific way that they keep track of their projects. You could put that project number in here. And then this is also, I mentioned it earlier, but this is where you're able to choose basically the amount of data that you need. So you're able to get a 1 mile buffer, 2.5, 5, or 10. If you only want to have information that is within your boundaries, you can select this no buffer option here. It's the same fee as having a 1 mile buffer. So it all depends on what your data needs are and the project that you have, kind of that information. But it's clearly labeled with the prices here. So there's hopefully no surprise when you get an invoice later. You're able to put a description right here. So we can just say this is a KYBAT webinar. And then today's date, because it feels like what I should do today. And then this information down here. So all this contact name information you can see is already filled out. I'm pretending to be Jane Doe today. This is all part of what you do when you register for an account. All this information will be there automatically, so you don't have to refill this out. You're always welcome to attach other files if there's information that you think is pertinent, or if your organization has a way that they also include information, you can attach those here, and then you just hit submit. Oops, I did forget to do that, didn't I? As I was talking about it, I never actually selected one. There we go. We'll just do a 1 mile buffer. There we go. Perfect. And it usually does say it takes about 5 minutes. You will get an email letting you know when it's done. And while we're waiting for that to be done, hopefully it doesn't take longer than 5 minutes. I've jinxed myself so many times already today. I will talk a little bit about our invoices. We send them out every 2 weeks. So on the 15th or the 30th of 31st of each month. And we just send them out as an email. So just keep an eye on your inbox and you'll see them there. You can pay online or you can pay by check on mail, and all that information is included in that invoice. But again, you're always welcome to reach out if you have questions or need clarification for anything.
Hey Liz, before we move on, can you play around with some of the layers, the ones that you are able to, just so that they're able to get a visual of what it might look like when they're creating a project?
Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see more of the state. There we go. We're not in by Richmond anymore. So yeah, you can see right here that those little kind of green shape files down there will show up. These are the Kentucky State natural areas that I mentioned earlier. We have wild rivers that show up with a nice bright blue. There are the nature preserves, and then the HLCF properties that Maddie is a huge part of that you can see that show up across the state. And then we also have from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we have critical habitat polygons that show up quite large, and they have lines as well. We do have state park boundaries that sometimes show up, public hunting areas, and federal areas as well. If you're ever clicking on a layer and you're having trouble seeing it, and you're like, I know it's on, and I know I should be able to see it, and I know this is exactly where it should be, or anything like that, usually it has to do with how far you're zoomed in or out that you're unable to see it. And that could be an issue of why you're unable to. We could be exactly on the right spot, and if you're just too far away, then it doesn't know it. Kind of the settings of the layer sometimes can be weird. But those are the most of our layers. You can also change the base map so that it is something different if you so choose. That is kind of what all those different layers look like, and they're helpful when you kind of zoom in as well. Of course, I'm so afraid of breaking my computer right now. So yeah, that's some examples of kind of the different things you can see, and all the symbology is different, so obviously for each layer, so that you can kind of distinguish between what's a critical habitat and what is a state park. It's easy to distinguish that way. Does that cover what you wanted to cover, Maddie?
Yeah, we have, you may or may not be able to answer these questions if,
oh yeah.
But there's 2 that popped up in the chat. And if we can't answer them, we can always get back to you. But one is, does the critical habitat layer from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service include proposed critical habitat as well as current designated critical habitat? That might not be something we have an answer to right now.
As far as I know, it's designated. I don't think there's anything from proposed. I could be wrong, so we can double check on that. I hate to answer for U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but as far as I'm aware, it's just what's already been designated.
Great. And then the second one is, what are your data sources? Which I'm not quite sure.
So when you're talking about like threatened and endangered species, our data sources would be that kind of biotics database that I mentioned earlier. That is where we, as an office, as nature preserves, are maintaining our own records, whether they be from a staff that have gone out in the field and collected data. So we have a person that went and saw whatever that endangered species was and they collected it, or if we have a partner that has also supplied us data and we've done a data swap. But it is Office of Nature Preserves maintained data in our database. It's called biotics. I don't think I was very clear about that earlier. So I appreciate the question so I could clarify. And if it didn't answer your question, I'm happy to keep talking, of course.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah. Hopefully our project is done now.
Wait, one more. Does the biological database include Kentucky Fish and Wildlife data yet?
That's a very good question. It's something that we're working on now, as always within state agencies and all organizations collaborating. There's a huge issue with legally what we're allowed to do and how we're allowed to do it. So we are working on creating those agreements and being allowed to share data across and things like that. So it is one of our goals to be able to do that, but right now it does not. So once you submit a project, you can see here that I've run several, one of them this morning, making sure everything works. So I didn't do what I already did today. But we come here, this is the one we just ran now at 12:24. And you can see here where it says report file. This is what's generated when you have run your KYBAT tool. This is the shapefile that you submitted. So you always have a record of the tool of the results and the input that you were able to have, always is going to be maintained here. And then all this information about who you are and the fee and all of those things. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this report. It's just the PDF that's going to open right up. There we go. And I will clarify what is up here is kind of all that information that's kind of showed on that website we were just on. And then you're going to have a nice little letter here that's going to tell you about your data and what we did, and if you have questions and all of that. What I really want to point out is this sentence right here. Is it says that your project does pose a concern at this time. Therefore, please see the attached reports and report key for more detailed information. Every report that has any sort of observation is going to tell you that it poses a concern. The only time it's going to tell you it does not pose a concern is if there's not a single observation. This phrasing is in here because we want to make sure that as a non-regulatory agency, that this draws your attention to you being aware of the fact that there are observations in your project area. We're not going to make a decision on whether or not your project can or can't continue, but this basically is the clarifying statement that does let you know that there have been observations and that you should pay attention and address them how you so choose. So that is basically what that sentence is. If you have any questions, it's how to contact. And then we scroll down here, and this is the standard occurrence report. So what you have here, and this has to do with that key, that report key that was mentioned at top. This will explain any of the acronyms, any things that you don't understand. All of that are explained in the report key, and you can look to it there. So we have everything from directions for how to locate it and the habitat information if it's recorded, and also obviously the species names and things. We do have some information that's considered sensitive, and so we don't disclose that information to ensure the long-term protection of those species and those individuals that were observed. So we do have that marked here, something like this, sensitive element, and then the contact information. And of course, it's onto the second page, but it tells you who to contact if you want to get a little bit of information, if you need clarification, anything like that. I'm going to keep scrolling down so we can show the contents. I know the screenshot that I showed in the presentation kind of didn't show. This one's a 6-page report, so we can't show the entire report on that presentation, which is why we like to do this so you can see it all. We also have the managed areas, the areas of significant biodiversity, and we also do have bat habitat that's contained in there. And then finally, the last part of this is we have a map. What you can see here, this black line is the actual project that I submitted, And the red line shows the buffer that you chose. So I just chose the 1 mile buffer. If it was no buffer, you'd have a little red line here that you almost couldn't see. If you chose larger, we'd kind of show a larger map. And then all of these kind of blue diagonal stripes are going to be the element occurrences that we recorded and reported previously in the report. If it is a sensitive element, you're not going to see any visualization of it on this map, but everything else you should be able to see here and kind of get an idea of where things were found. So that is an example KYBAT report that took about 5 minutes for it to actually show up and how that works. So that is all I have for my presentation today. As Maddie said, this is the contact information which she provided in the link, which was in the chat, which was super helpful. And then if you ever wanted to get to KYBAT itself, this is the website here. I would always like to point out that you must put the S. I sometimes miss the S and I end up at a completely different website. So it's kynaturepreserves.org and it'll take you right there. As I said, there's the help video that's located there if you needed help making an account or if you wanted a little walkthrough on how to submit a project again. Of course, if there are any questions now, I will be happy to answer them or do my best to answer them. But always feel free to follow up with this email. As Maddie mentioned, I am on my way out, but Noor Salam is the one that's taking over and she is more than competent and will answer any questions that you have moving forward. So if you have questions today or discussions, or if you have recommendations of layers or resources that you would like to see on part of that map, we are always open to suggestions, whether or not I'm actually able to do them. So thank you guys.
Thanks so much, Liz. That was great, despite the chaos that we had.
Question.
Literally 60 seconds before this meeting. Nothing
Can I
more.
ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Go
Of
ahead.
course.
So it's like 2 questions.
Okay.
One, who's most your customers? And if you are not your state agency, if you're not a state agency, like if you are a state agency, what's the difference between the information I get from water, fish and wildlife, and you?
That's a very good question. I would say that most of our customers are probably consulting companies. We are seeing a recent increase in other state agencies becoming customers, but we also do have kind of a wide variety. Sometimes it's federal, it's all over across the board, which is really nice. We want to see our data being used. So anyone that wants to use it, we encourage to come. As far as the difference between data that you're getting from Division of Water or anyone else, I would say that our data is very complementary towards the data that they're providing you. There might be some overlap given the potential different partnerships that we have with these different agencies. But I would say that our database biotics is, I want to say, Maddie, you might know more than I do, it's probably about 20 years old. So we have a very long history of collecting this data, and it's some of it, it's quite an expansive data set that we have. We have about 16,000 records, give or take. So we are providing quite a bit of data depending on where you are in the state. So I want to say our data is really complementary with them, with potentially a bit of overlap, because we try, in order to do the best protection that we can, we want to have great partnerships with them and make sure that we are sharing data as much as possible. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome, yeah.
If anyone else has any questions now that the presentation is over, you are welcome to turn on your mics and ask as well.
Yes. Love to answer questions. I think we're going to try and send maybe a follow-up email or a follow-up survey to kind of get your all's feedback if you have any suggestions of content that you would like to see. So if there are other layers that you know about that think would be helpful for people using this tool, or if you just have clarifying questions, always, I think we're going to try and send a follow-up email so that we can help anybody with anything. I also didn't mention that that the report fee is based on a per report basis, but if you are with an organization or a company or an agency or anything like that that is in need of running multiple reports a year, we do have like a subscription fee that you're able to create, and it's just something that you would contact us about. So this email contact that's right here, you're able to just send an email to that and request information about a subscription, and we can provide you with information about how to go about that. And it's at a little bit lower rate if you do create a subscription. So I cannot see the chat, but I'm trusting Maddie and all of her chat viewing. So if nobody else has questions, I just really want to thank you guys.
That was it. There is one more, there's just, I guess, a comment about watershed planning layers could be helpful due to the increased availability of funds in those areas.
Oh, yes, thank you.
We do have a question.
Okay.
Willing to provide data for research projects or interested in obtaining data from researchers outside of your office?
So that's a very good question. Our kind of data requests outside of KYBAT are kind of addressed on I wouldn't say case by case, but on a kind of more individualized basis. So if you have a question about whether or not you're able to receive data, go ahead and you can send that email, or Nora should have, I don't know if Nora's here, but I should have just put Nora's email on here. But you are able to send an email and just say that you're looking for data and wondering how to go about it. There's a chance that you might be sent to KYBAT depending on kind of the description of your progress or project. But it just depends kind of on kind of the goals of it. As far as receiving data from other kind of outside sources, from non-internal Office of Nature Preserves, is I know that, community science has become so much more prevalent recently. Things like iNaturalist and being able to submit your data is such a cool way to interact with scientists, and it's so important. So I would say in that aspect, we have some of our biologists and botanists who actually do data mining from iNaturalist, because you're able to confirm and verify that. As far as individuals providing data, I'm unaware of individuals providing data, but that doesn't mean that we can't. And we're always open to accepting data in the ways that we can, because more data is good. But I say that as a person who loves data.
There's one, this, to answer Christy, does this link with iNaturalist, and could you show us an example of how to use iNaturalist? It doesn't, like Liz said earlier, it doesn't link directly with iNaturalist. It's more of like our biologists going out and finding, useful things on iNaturalist to incorporate into this database. We do offer, if anyone is interested in using iNaturalist, that is, as our outreach specialist, we do offer workshops and presentations on that. So if you're interested in learning more how to use it, you can follow us on our social media accounts to find updates about that. Couple more questions, Liz. I'm sorry. Every time you're done talking, you think you're done. I think you might have answered this one, but is there a mechanism for other state agencies to pay, through the subscription? Yes.
So through the subscription would probably be the best way to do it. As it's ever growing and evolving, my thing would always be to reach out and ask questions and clarify if you have any confusion at all. But yeah, that is the way that we generally do it right now, is through subscription, especially if you're kind of an agency that would be running multiple reports. It's cost effective to go ahead and get a subscription, and then it allows several users within the same, whether it's an organization or a state agency, to be able to submit projects, and we keep track of them, and we kind of let you know when you have just a couple left, and make sure that you're kind of aware of how many you have and are able to move forward.
And I think lastly, we have, does our office data get exported to GBIF?
I'm not familiar with GBIF. Are you, Maddie?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Are you familiar with GBIF?
I don't know. I don't know that file.
Sorry, I'll explain the question. It's a global biodiversity information facility, I think.
You're right.
So like all the iNaturalist, like any point data for biodiversity things goes there. So like eBird and iNaturalist also get funneled into that. It's like the mega repository. I was just curious if we did.
No. That's a great question, and
if I looked in GBIF, would I get all the data, or would there be hidden data?
No, no, of course. I appreciate your clarification. I was like, it sounds familiar, but I hate to start answering and not be 100% sure. Our data does not go through there. We maintain our own data and provide it individually as people need it. It's quite a large data set, so to send it all out and lose kind of because I think we're updating it so regularly, even records that are considered historical, we still sometimes are like, oh wait, no, it's not, and we need to add this, or we need to change this, but that way we kind of maintain it in-house and provide it as people request for it individually. Thank you for your clarification on what that was, by the way. Maddie, do we have more questions, or did I talk everyone's ear off?
I think we are good. And again, if you do have any more questions, please contact KYBAT@ky.gov. But thank you all so much for joining. This is a really incredible tool that we're proud of and put a lot of work into. Thank you so much, Liz, for explaining that to us and giving this presentation while you're also halfway out the door. The last thing before you.
Yeah, I really want to, as Maddie said, thank you guys for coming today and appreciate your patience via my technical difficulty. You would think as a data person, I would sometimes be more tech savvy, but the computer crash right before just really did me in for a little bit. So your all's patience is greatly appreciated. And if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up at this email here, or go ahead and get started and start running reports. Thank you guys.
Thanks all.